Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Prospector Jess. I'm here to help you find more gold. So, tonight we're going to talk about something that it's a bit of art imitates history, imitates art. How about that? You've heard of the phrase, gold is where you find it. Now, a lot of people have different assumptions about what that means. What you may not know is there is a historic precedent. You see, there was a movie created in early movie history that was titled Gold is Where You Find It. It starred none other than Olivia de Havilland. She was quite the rock star of her time. And so, one of the things that this movie did was kind of poke at gold prospecting and gold mining in a way that was, we'll just call it not very nice. But in the reality is, it was basically imitating reality. It was imitating history. So art imitates, you got it. So here's the thing. I want to point at this because this bit of history is part of what you deal with as a legacy when it comes to gold prospecting and gold mining. And so we need to kind of be informed as gold prospectors and miners so that we understand a little bit about why people react the way they do. You may or may not know much about what it takes to do gold mining, but one of the things that's used in many cases is a concept called a gold monitor or a hydraulic, mine. Okay, and hydraulic mining is extremely powerful and extremely effective at pulling out gold placer deposits that are ancient stuck under the mountain. It'll move whole mountains. The problem is it has a side effect. It has an undesirable side effect in that once those mountains are loosened, they travel downstream just like any other deposit, but a lot more effectively, a lot faster. So what would normally take maybe thousands or even millions of years would take just a short period, a couple of seasons, to move tons and tons of material downstream. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of the history behind that whole thing and what kind of happened, because it's important. It is the basis for a lot of the arguments about gold dredging and anything that interferes with the waterbed. And so it's something that we need to be aware of. It's also something to be aware of when you use this phrase, gold is where you find it. Because oftentimes people use that as a kind of an easy out, okay? Well, gold is where you find it. Translation, I haven't found any lately. So, but in reality, what they really mean, maybe if they're correct, is, gold is kind of what you look at things and where you find it. Well, that's closer, okay? And that's a little bit of what this art was about, this movie, okay? But going beyond that, gold is kind of where you find it. The trick is knowing where to look. So that's what I'm all about. And it has the effect of kind of offsetting a little bit of all the noise that we're talking about. You don't have to necessarily hydraulic a whole mountain down to find significant quantities of gold, but you do have to use your thinker. And then you have to think about, you should be thinking about, well, what are the side effects of what I'm doing? And here comes a simple thing you can do, and I know a lot of prospectors do this. Fill your holes. Okay, a lot of detectorists do this. Fill every hole. Okay, why? Because if nobody knows you've been there, then they can't really, deny you access, so to speak, not easily. But if they find all kinds of pockmarks all over the hillside, then there's going to be trouble. I guarantee it. And it relates to the thing I'm going to show you in a second. So what we're talking about is gold is where you find it. Well, if you're finding gold and you're careful, you'll probably find more gold. Now, if you're using legal means of access, that is, you have claim access or somebody's given you access to their claim, okay? On the other hand, if you're working in an area where it's not legal to mine and you're mining, then you're asking for it. You're also asking to give everybody else a bad name. And so I really want to stress, for the benefit of the whole community, please try to obey what laws exist. I know it's not always easy to figure out what they mean. And that's true with dredging right now and a bunch of other stuff, okay? But just because somebody's not necessarily on really solid ground in terms of their legal doesn't make it perfect for you to go out and exploit that situation, especially when it comes into things like what I'm going to show you. because it tends to cascade. People tend to amplify these things politically and etc. You probably know that. You can comment below about that. I'd like not to go down that political road too far because, well, it ends up being a big, contest, so to speak. But gold is where you find it is an interesting topic in its own right. Let me check to make sure before I go off on that tangent that everything's running well. I just kind of got gun shy after the last few weeks of little problems we had. So there's gold is where you find it. And we've got 2 comments, but I think we got more. Refresh it, and it says we now have 2 comments. That can't be true. We must have more than 2 comments. It's not letting me refresh it. That could be the problem. Let me refresh it up here. Whole list of things being published in the past few weeks. 17 comments. Okay, so yeah. And so I have my volume pegged at 11. Is the sound low? It better not be low. No, it's not low. Not low on my end. It's going out full. That's a good question. Translates it to not telling you where I found it. Yeah, gold is where you found it. I'm not telling you. Okay, it's a throwaway line. Okay, good day from Perth. Hello from Alabama. The sound and picture are good in Alabama, so other people are having audio video is good in Perth, so we're good across the world. Now, check. I don't know, it's volume pegged at 11. The sound should not be low. I might have been turned away from the mic, but usually this catches everything. So I don't see any indications that I'm suffering from a sound problem, and the world seems to say yes. So let's go on with this topic. Okay, gold is where you find it. So if I zoom over here, well, one of the places you can find gold, I'm going to broadcast a little bit here. Check out the Prospectors HQ and join. Okay, it's a great place to kind of make contact with people. There's 6,600 of us there, and we're sharing things that we find. Okay, some related to gold, some not so much. This one's interesting because it's got some coppery stuff, but it also has layers that tell me it's a schist type material heading toward gneiss because you can see the particles and grains in it, but it's still a schist. Once a schist, always a schist. Got people prospecting and finding and all that kind of good stuff. I wanted to go down a ways here. Agates, interesting finds. Keep your eyes peeled, and in this kind of material you may find some interesting stuff that it goes beyond gold in terms of values. Charles says try polishing it. Absolutely. Get a rock tumbler and tumble it. Okay, some prospecting news from Mariposa area. So Jason's out here finding gold. So gold is where you find it. Well, he's finding it. That's one of the best cures for that question. But that's really not what we're about tonight necessarily. I did want to kind of show and tout this picture. It's pretty cool stuff. I love this one here. It looks like a dragon curled up or something. So great finds. Keep it up, Jason. Let us know what you find. And so with that said, let's go look at this historic thing called Gold is Where You Find It. So in 1938, an American romantic drama was created, fictionalized account of a real true historical event. The historical event was the massive flooding and mudsliding downstream from the gold rush era, late gold rush, about 1890s, 1870s and 90s. They started moving into hydraulicking in areas where they had previously been digging and kind of everything petered out. The easy gold was gone. But under those mountains were massive placer deposits, and everybody knew it. What they found was a pretty straightforward process by using a big jet stream of water, as seen on TV, okay, called a monitor. These fire hoses were aimed at the mountainside and would just peel off layer after layer, and they'd set up their sluices at the base of that hillside and collect the water and drain it down through a sluice box, which oftentimes contained a lot of mercury. That's where a lot of the mercury we deal with today came from, was that whole exercise. And it was rather inefficient, but effective. Inefficient that it actually dumped mercury and gold out the back end. So that stuff continued to be available for those of us who can find it. and also continue to plague those of us who have to deal with that legacy. That was back in the 1800s, early 1900s. Even then, the mercury that was deposited was left behind. At that time, the mercury was as valuable, if not more valuable, than the gold. So they took great strides to try to keep the mercury. But even then, with the amount of flow they were getting through these massive sluices and the monitors they were jetting from the big mountain rivers, they couldn't help but just blow stuff by. And a lot of the stuff, if you think about the mercury and the gold not being trapped, imagine the volume, the sheer volume of mud, rock, and debris that was shooting from the mountainside into the river. Now, winter flood comes along, all that stuff is now loose. It's no longer compacted or concreted. It's available to the river to carry downstream, and it did. And it carried it down and started basically rolling out across the wheat fields and rice fields and whatever fields there were, and creating a problem because a lot of the material that was being deposited was nowhere near as rich as the loamy soils that existed in the Central Valley of California. That was a huge problem. It killed farms, large-scale problems in growing stuff. It also caused massive shifts in the rivers themselves in the Delta area around Sacramento, causing flooding every season. And so pretty soon they had a whole bunch of people who are really up in arms. The movie is about that. It's a miner romancing a farmer's daughter. There's always got to be a farmer's daughter in this story, okay? And the whole story is, kind of how does this all work, and how do you see what you're destroying with your gold? Because gold is where you find it. See the theme, okay? And so the idea was, this is a title for a movie about really effectively anti-gold movement early on, okay? And so this, and by the way, before this movie ever took place, legal action took place, and it stopped it, okay? It stopped the monitors in California. But it was one of these things where you kind of like right in that window between the Civil War and the early 1900s, there was this rampant mining practice that was not so wise. Certainly wasn't very stewardship and community oriented. And so the end result being, people were pretty pissed off, okay? Put it blunt. That is the same kind of thing we can engender and do engender whenever we kind of run our mouths off or whatever and try to fight people on stuff that really we should be figuring out ways to do. Now, I know a lot of prospectors, a lot of you have spent time working on the fish beds, working on the deals of trying to work out how to make things cleaner, how to pick up around the trash. Because a lot of the mine sites that people blame miners for are not miners. It's oftentimes the homeless. It's other people that will get blamed for leaving trash behind. So we end up spending extra time and extra effort. Whole bands of people have gone out in the San Gabriel River area. That's just notorious for homeless encampments and trash, and picked up all that garbage and moved it out several times a year for no cost to the Forest Service. So clearly we've caught that. That's good. The thing is, we got to keep that going, because when you look at this kind of gold is where you find it thing, these things tend to have a long history and long legs. They go all over the place. These movements, if you will, or activism. Okay, that's the big thing now. Activism. We all want to be an activist. The gold miners want to be activists too, but we aren't notorious for the kind of activism we're talking about. So one of the things that this movie did was kind of made everybody aware of the destruction of crops and homes and that kind of stuff, and made that kind of drive home in people's heads as to gold is bad, farming's good. See the deal? Okay, so what we're looking at is, in our world, dredging's bad, fishing's good. See the difference? Not a whole lot, okay? The reality is, no, they can be complementary. They don't have to be, good versus bad or, whatever. But there are practices that need to be mitigated. That's a term we use in engineering, where we take a risk of a hazard or a harm and we flip it. We figure out how to stop the risk from taking place and maybe even improve the fish beds in the process. That's oftentimes what happens with dredging that people don't know. So they will go in, the fish people will go in and clean up an area to create fish beds by driving tractors all through the water. Okay, There's no way in the world, physically, from an engineering point of view, that driving tractors through and using a backhoe is any different than a dredge, except one thing. The dredge moves the harmful products, that's how it works, from the water that flows through, whereas the backhoe does not. The backhoe just stirs it all up. And yet the backhoes are still encouraged for a fee to the U.S. government to clean up the fish beds. So you can see how this kind of fits together, and how the story can get out of control. I just find it kind of humorous, and that's why I brought up tonight. Gold is where you find it is something we've sort of grabbed onto as prospectors and said, well, that's what I tell everybody. And I go, be careful what you wish for, because this was a protest. You're glomming onto the title of a show that's anti-gold. You better understand the history of these things before you start working them in the public, because oftentimes the public is a little more aware of these things. You know, they've got Netflix, and they go back to the oldies but goodies and find these things. I just found it kind of humorous that gold is where you find it is really a protest. So that's it I have for tonight. I just wanted to bring this up and kind of point out, careful, watch what you say, watch what you do, and get your gold. Go find it. So I hope everything's going okay. Let me check and make sure we don't have any questions that popped up. I just wanted to do that. I haven't done it for a few nights. We had Oregon Gold earlier in the week. I hope you got a chance to view that. That's a previous broadcast from a day or so ago. Visited the whole idea of Oregon Gold and did some, sleuthing around and showed you a few places where I've got a couple of videos on Oregon Gold. So go check. And that's it for this week's installment, or this weekend's installment. We're on Thursday. We're heading toward the weekend. So we'll see you on Sunday. And have a great weekend, and may your pans be heavy. Prospector Jess, over and out. Good prospecting. See you then.